fast chord switching. So one question I get a lot is there anything you can tell me to help me switch my chords quicker? You know, players who are learning chord switches frequently get a little discouraged by how much repetitious practice it takes and how much time it takes before they can just pick up the guitar and switch quickly from one chord to the other. So for years, I would just say, keep practicing, you're on the right track. It's just a lot of repetitious practice, point A to point B over and over, you'll get it. But nobody really likes that answer. And indeed, I sort of had a suspicion after a while that maybe there's a little more to it than that. And then I noticed some things in some of my players playing that definitely led me to develop a theory that I would like to share and see what you guys think about. And I actually feel like this really does make a difference in either how well or how not well you switch from chord to chord. So what am I talking about? Well, let me give you the examples that I saw that gave me the idea of this theory. So I had an older student who'd been working on bar chords, and he'd been practicing a lot, but he came into my studio one day and said he was a little bit frustrated that he'd been practicing so much and still couldn't switch quickly into his bar chord. So I asked him to play for me, and I noticed that when he switched into his B minor, he would set his bar down first. And as he did that, his other fingers were sort of pulled and retracted in towards the bar. So then he had to reach and stretch and set those fingers and go through a bit of a process to get the chord set. And it did look like it was, costing him some time and some extra work. I looked at how I did it, and I noticed that, well, I didn't really feel like I led with the bar, first of all. And secondly, I sort of noticed that, if anything, I was leading with more of the shape of the chord. Notice if I lead with this third and fourth finger placement, this stacking, I call it, of those two fingers, look at how it brings the other fingers right over their destinations. So they have a lot less travel and a lot less work to go through to get set into the chord. So that got me thinking, okay, maybe it makes a difference, how you organize your movements, what finger you lead with first. And then I was watching another player, a guy who'd been playing a long time. This guy, he'd been playing longer than I'd been alive. And he could, he was in a bluegrass group and he could switch all his open chords. But G was one chord he lagged into. Every time he would switch to G, there would be a bit of a lag before he got all his fingers set up. And, I thought to myself, gosh, this guy's been playing forever. If he hasn't gotten that switch to G now, something's getting in his way that's keeping him from ever getting it. And I watched his hand as he switched to G, and I noticed when he went to G, he was setting the note on the first string first, in this case the pinky. So notice if you set that finger down first, how all your other fingers are pulled away from their destination point, so you have to then reach and stretch and set those fingers to get into the chord. Whereas if you were jumping to a G chord and you set the bass finger first, whether it be the 2 or the 3, notice how by doing that it brings the other fingers right over their spots. And again, it's a lot less work and a lot less movement required to get into the chord quickly. And so that definitely showed me that it can really make or break and make a big difference, which finger you kind of lead with or sort of, again, organize the other finger movements around. So I think this is a big deal. It's not just brute force, point A to point B, just, jumping your hand from one to the other. There's a little bit of an art to the way your fingers move. And by setting the wrong finger down first, you could actually cost yourself some time and make more work for yourself. Another example, C chord. I had a young student who was just learning chords, and he had a terrible time getting into C, a long process of getting everything reached and set. And I noticed it was because he was putting his first finger down first. Not only did putting the first finger down first kind of pull all his fingers away from where they needed to be and cost him a lot of time and work to get them there, but it was also sort of bringing his hand positioning into a sort of cranked back, kind of pulled away position, and he had to dip the elbow and drop his shoulder a bit and bend his wrist, as well as reach his fingers out to get to the C chord. Whereas I noticed another player, jumping right to the third finger on the C chord, leading with that third finger first. Notice how it not only brings the other fingers right over where they're supposed to set, but it also brings your hand positioning out and your fingers out and in front of the guitar and right over the strings, and definitely sets you up for a better switch than if you were to say set the 1 first. So the finger you set first, or the finger you lead with as you're learning and building the muscle memory for switching from one chord to the other, I think it really, really can make a big difference. One more example I saw was F. Everybody gets so sort of, wrapped up in this bar, the difficulty of that 2-string bar that you have in the F chord. And it's really, really understandable that a player would focus on that and want to set that bar first and then reach and set the fingers, but it costs you so much time. Setting the bar first, again, pulls the fingers away from their destinations. Just like with the G, just like with the C, if you can get that third finger set first, notice how it just brings the hand right over the strings and brings the other fingers right over their frets and their locations. Some chords it doesn't matter. I had a few students who could switch really quickly into D, and so I asked them which finger they led with, and one player told me they lead with the 3 they felt like, and they were able to get to D really quickly. Another player told me, well, they feel like they set the 2 first. And same thing, they could get right into the chord. My advice was to set the 1 first, but it looked like either way you could lead with any finger and get a simultaneous placement with just a little bit of practice. Same thing with chords like A and E. These chords where your fingers kind of lay down in a natural order, or in the order that sort of resembles the way they come off of your hand. Those chords, I feel like you could probably get away with coming into them a variety of different ways and still have success. But it's these chords where you have to turn your hand laterally so they're sort of parallel to the strings and reach across with these 3rd and 4th fingers. You have to really watch out and ask yourself, are you setting a finger down first or a bar down first where it's actually putting you at a disadvantage right before you try to set the other fingers? Or is there a different finger you could lead with that would then bring your whole hand and all your fingers right over the strings? So if you're working on your chord switches and you're having a hard time ironing out a switch and you've been working on it for a while and you really feel like you should have it by now, just take a look at it, examine, analyze which finger do you feel like you're leading with, and what's your hand positioning look like? Is there another way you could come into it? I will admit it's hard to, what do they say? It's hard to change horses midstream. It's hard to change the habits you formed once you form basic habits from just the beginning of switching 2 chords. But it's worth it if you can kind of take your time and analyze and break down how your fingers are moving, and maybe eliminate something that's getting in your way and possibly keeping you from ever getting, a chord switch really smooth. So that's my idea on the leading finger theory to help chord switches. I hope that helps anybody. Let me know what you think.